And imagine close to 600 horsepower on a car that weighs about 1400 kgs. When you put your foot to the pedal, this is what happens. Welcome back to Harmonixx Tuning. In today's episode, we have a very special build for you guys. So right behind me is India's fastest MQB build that we built for a customer of ours. Back in November 2023, we sent this car to the Launch Control 6 event that happened at the Buddh International Circuit, and our customer clocked a phenomenal 10.7 second runs in the quarter mile and a 100 to 200 time of 6.3 seconds, making this the fastest E8888 Gen 3 build in the country. We are going to be showing you guys a step-by-step procedure of what is involved in tuning a car like this. The car is currently on an aggressive 100 round map, and today we are going to be working with the awesome folks at EQT to dial in a 95 round map for this Audi TT. So now that we have the car strapped onto the dyno, the first thing we need to do is to disconnect the Harmonixx controller so the car can be run in front wheel drive mode. To disconnect the Harmonixx controller, you need to remove the seat and remove this plastic panel over here, and there is a Harmonixx connector over here that we need to unplug so that the car can be run in front wheel drive mode. So the next step is to put the car in dyno mode. So we are going to be doing that by using B flash. Using B flash, we can put the cars in dyno mode with just a click of a button. So one of the key reasons why we put these cars in dyno mode is to disable the traction control system completely. So let's say we are doing a pull on the dyno and the traction control system is enabled. If it detects a wheel spin, the ECU will automatically start to cut power. So to prevent this, we basically disable the traction control altogether by putting the car in the dyno mode. So to tune this Audi TT, we are going to be using a platform called as ECU-Tech. ECU-Tech is very famous for the Nissan R35 GTR platform and as well as the B58, BMW M340 and the Supra platforms as well. So now we are going to be plugging the ECU-Tech dongle into the OBD port of the car. And then we are going to wait for Ed Sussman from Equilibrium Tuning to send us the base file so that we can get started. So we received the first base map around midnight. It's about 3 in the morning right now, and we finally went through 7 revisions before we finalized the tune for the 95 round map. The black curve you see over here is the base map for the 95 round, and on the 7th revision we made about 500 horsepower. Now let's overlay this with the 100 round aggressive map that we use for the events. So the blue line you see over here made about 585 horsepower. So that's about 85 horsepower difference between the 95 round and the 100 round map on this particular car. So now we're going to be taking the car out for a test drive in the morning and see how it performs on the street. So a lot of people consider the TT to be a very impractical car. It probably is a little impractical if you're trying to cram 4 adults into this car. But if you're one of those who live in a metro city and it's just 2 people traveling in the car most of the time, we believe that there couldn't be a better car than the TT for a city like Bangalore. To start with, the car has really small form factor, so that means you can literally take the car anywhere, park it anywhere with ease. The second most important thing what we love about the TT is the way the suspension is dialed in by Audi. We've driven a lot of cars over the years, and having practically owned a VRS myself as well, there's a huge difference in the way the TT handles and rides even on bad roads. We believe this is one of the best OE suspension setups that we have come across in our lifetime, and you have to drive this car in bad roads to believe how well set up the suspension is. And then comes the handling bit. The TT is so light and nimble that you can literally chuck it into corners like a go-kart and it just goes in the direction you point it to. A lot of people assume that the TT, being based on the Harmonixx platform, will understeer a lot into corners. An easy solution to that is to basically put some wider alloys with some really grippy rubber like the Adva Neova 8008s or the Michelin PS4S or the Cup 2s for that matter, and that changes the overall characteristic of how the car behaves in corners. Plonk in a big brake kit and you have tremendous stopping power, and the exit speeds that this car can maintain when coming out of the corner is just mind-boggling. We have driven the TT, the M340i and the VRS a lot in twisty roads, but one thing we appreciate the TT for is the kind of mind-boggling mechanical grip it provides in corners. We've driven all the three cars extensively, but every single time we come out of a corner in the TT, it just puts a really wide grin on your face. And then there is the DQ250 and the E888 Gen 3 combo. This car might be a puny 2-liter, but the kind of numbers it produces on our tune with this setup is mind-numbing. 100 to 200 in 6.3 seconds, a quarter mile time of 10.7 seconds, and just to put things into perspective, the Stage 3 M340i with a big 3-liter B58 engine does 100 to 200 in about 6.6 seconds and a quarter mile time of 10.8 seconds. And imagine close to 600 horsepower on a car that weighs about 1400 kgs. When you put your foot to the pedal, this is what happens. Yet another thing we really love about the Audi TT is the build quality and the fit and finish. We've mostly stripped a lot of the plastics on this car for the drag events and put them back together, and till date we've not heard a single rattle or a squeak coming from this. The same cannot be said even on a stock VRS. Those things rattle a lot, they have sunroof noise, the B pillars on the VRS rattle quite a bit, but none of that on the Audi TT. Yet another wonderful thing about the TT is how comfortable these seats are. They just hug you into place, don't throw you around even when you're cornering pretty hard. And when you compare these with the M340i seats and the VRS seats, these seats are a league ahead. The M340i seats are actually quite uncomfortable, especially on long journeys when you're driving for 4 hours plus. But we've been in the Audi TT for over 10 hours at a stretch, and it's never broken our backs. So you guys might feel that we're being a little biased towards our review of the TT. And maybe we are a little bit partial towards this car for all the pluses that it ticks in our checkbox. However, this car also has its own drawbacks. For starters, the E888 Gen 3 engines don't sound good at all. For a 2-liter engine, the Mini Cooper JCWs are the benchmark for good exhaust note, and the TT lacks in that department by quite a huge margin. Another major drawback of the TT is the rear visibility. So when you're trying to park the car in a crowded place or in a parking lot, the rear visibility through the mirrors and the rear windshield is so bad, it makes this car really difficult to park. And to add to that, this particular model of the TT neither has a reverse camera, neither does it come with a display where you can see where you're going. So the dashboard layout of the TT and the cluster might look very simple to you guys. And yes, it is not as futuristic as some of the current generation cars. However, the dual cockpit design is predominantly designed from a driver's perspective, and all the controls, including the AC vents, are just an arm length away from you. So overall, the cabin of the TT is a very, very nice place to be in, and that, when coupled with a Stage 3 tune, just makes this one of our favorite cars that we've driven till date. Back in April 2022, Amit and myself flew down to Surat from Bangalore in order to check this TT. Once we had vetted the car thoroughly, we decided to purchase it and drive it back to Bangalore. Our aim with this TT was to basically do a 10-second quarter mile with a Stage 3 build, and we thought the road to 10-second quarter mile is going to be a very easy journey. However, it was far from that. On the way back to Bangalore, the car actually broke down just outside of Bombay, where the Harmonixx unit had completely seized. So we had to flatbed the car back to Bangalore and we sent it to Audi. Once we had the car inspected by Audi Bangalore, we realized that the Harmonixx oil on this particular TT was never changed since the day it was bought. And that is what led to the failure of the Harmonixx. So we finally got a new Harmonixx unit installed on the car, and then we began the process of tuning this car in about August 2022. So once we had completed the stage 3 build on this car, we took it out to Taneja Aerospace to test it. So this was during the Time Attack event we co-hosted along with the drivers up, and that is when for the first time we realized that the car just wouldn't launch. So it would take off the line in first gear like a naturally aspirated engine would, and once the car shifted into second gear and hit about 4000 RPM, that is when it would start building boost. So for the ensuing months, we started following up with EcuTech, understanding why the car would not launch, and that is when we realized that this particular TT has a really peculiar box code where EcuTech could not get the launch control to work at all. So this battle continued for another year, and the car was consistently clocking quarter mile times of anywhere between 11.3 to 11.6 seconds, but that was not our aim when we started this build. In November 2023, once we had completely exhausted all our resources in getting the launch control to work properly, we removed the TCU tune from ECU Tech, and then we approached TVS Engineering for a stage 3 TCU tune. Once we had the TVS tune on the car started to launch a lot better, and we ended up doing a 11.3 second run at Vroom. Even though we were not entirely happy with how the car was launching, we decided to send the car to Launch Control 6 at the Buddh International Circuit to see what it could do in ideal conditions. Fortunately for us, Amit went on to set the Indian national record by clocking a 10.75 second in the quarter mile, and then backed that up with 5 consecutive runs in the 10.8 seconds, making this the fastest MQB car in India. So within 1 hour of setting the national record at the Buddh International Circuit, we loaded the TT back onto a flatbed and had it sent back to Bangalore. The next weekend was the Vroom event at Taneja Aerospace, and we wanted to make sure that the TT took part at Vroom. Due to a lot of unfortunate delays at the border checkposts in multiple states, the car basically managed to reach our workshop in the wee hours of Saturday morning. We barely managed to unload the car from the flatbed, put it onto our own flatbed and take it to Taneja Aerospace for the scrutiny. Once we were done with the scrutiny, we took the car back to the workshop, changed the engine oil on the car, and on Sunday, we went on to clock 11.004 seconds and 11.005 seconds in the quarter mile at Vroom, setting yet another national record. Now let's pop the hood and show you guys what we are running on the TT. So when you look at the engine bay, you don't see a lot of mods in the engine bay actually. So the star of the show is the Equity Vortex XL Turbo that we have over here. That is connected to a track slag 4-inch downpipe. For the intake, we're using a Racing Line R600, and we're also running an APR catch can. So just a couple of weeks before we shipped the car to the Buddh International Circuit for the Launch Control 6 event, the car actually started throwing some minor tantrums. The car was actually losing boost up top, and we initially diagnosed that to basically a cracked intake manifold. So these cars originally come with a plastic intake manifold, so we had that replaced with a JDY intake manifold that is completely billet. Apart from the mods that you see in the engine bay, the car also runs 2 more additional mods in the fueling department. So we are running an upgraded high pressure fuel pump from Autotech, and we are also running an upgraded low pressure fuel pump that sits under the rear seat. Nearly a year and a half after we started this build on the TT, we finally achieved our goal of a 10-second run. So somewhere on the screen, we'll be putting up the dyno charts of the stock car, the 95 RON that we tuned recently, and the map with which we clocked a 10.7 second run on this car. Pretty much sums up the build on this Audi TT. Stay tuned to our channel for more car content coming your way.